Capcom, you son of a bitch. Are we living in a dream? Are we eating too damn good? I mean, my plate was already full before, but now I'm being offered another full course. Yeah, 7 more classic fighting games and Capcom Fighting Evolution are all in one snazzy package with all the bells and whistles that the MVC collection is getting. Capcom vs. SNK is the headliner this time, as it was the most requested and most obvious way to follow up the previous collection. But just like any music festival, you need strong acts across the board to make the event truly memorable. Just like before, we'll be looking at ports of each of these games that got released in the States. Last time, the sum total of the best loose ports of the MVC collection was around $550, and the complete and box price for the same was around $1,200. Keep those numbers in mind as we're going to do the same thing on this video. Will this collection be more or less expensive? Let's find out.
Capcom Fighting
Okay, let's get this one out of the way right now. Capcom Fighting Evolution is the aborted fetus of a much more interesting game called Capcom Fighting All-Stars. It came out at a time when fighting games were in a bit of a slump and Capcom's fighting game division was about to die. Impressions of the early arcade test build of All-Stars were less than stellar and Capcom decided to pull the plug. The game died, and the concept of a Capcom-only crossover fighter got Frankenstein together into the hot mess you see before you. I mean, look at this shit, man! Inconsistent sprite art, ugly-ass backgrounds with random pixelated art assets from other Capcom properties, and a half-assed series of mechanics across the whole roster. Pretty much the only positives are the new Shinkiro portrait art, the endings done by Udon, and the idea of a Capcom-only crossover fighting game being cool. Now let's look at these prices. Nobody wants this shit, and rightfully so. I guess it's good for preservation's sake. I wish we got Techromancer instead. Now, let's go from the simplest port breakdown to the most complicated.
Street Fighter Alpha 3.
So, Alpha 3 Upper is the PS1 and Dreamcast versions of Alpha 3 re-released back into arcades, but only in Japan. Obviously, any extra modes in the home version are going to get stripped away, leaving you with just the arcade mode and the expanded roster. In terms of roster, it's beefier than vanilla Alpha 3, but it's not quite as big as Alpha 3 Max. And to a similar extent, the GBA version. Yeah, there was a GBA port that came out surprisingly well. Compromises need to be made for sure, but it's a very good port for what it is. There is one more port of Upper on the Alpha Anthology collection hidden in there if you use a code. It's a slightly revised version compared to the others, but it's mostly the same, even down to the controversial balance changes. The most common complaint regarding Upper to the competitive scene is the elimination of crouch canceling. Simply put, it was a mechanic that allowed you to pull off some infinites with some characters while using V-ism. Nobody's gonna be learning Infinite today, but if you're a filthy casual, you'll have a good ass time with Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper, that's for sure. In terms of ports, Alpha 3 has the most out of anybody on this list. I'm also adding in the digital PS1 version that's on the PS3 store, as you can still buy that version, just like Fighting Evolution as of this recording.
Capcom. Capcom versus SNK.
Just like MVC1, CVS1 gets overshadowed by a sequel, but it does a thing or two better than the sequel. The presentation in CVS1 is leagues better than 2. Everything down to selecting your character to the SNK style stage intros, all being presented in the style of a live TV broadcast. One major strike against it is its ratio system, which limits the kind of teams you can have with the roster being divided up by point value. I can see what they're trying to do, but I'm glad that didn't get bought over to the sequel. For ports this time, you just have the Dreamcast and PS1. The Dreamcast version is closer to arcade perfect than the PS1, but since CVS isn't a tag fighter, you won't have as many drawbacks as the Marvel games on PS1. This is my copy of CVS1 that I got for the Dreamcast a few years back. The store I got it from didn't have the manual or the case, but I think I remember paying around $40 for it, which it's nice to know that not everything in the world has been completely fucked to inflation.
Capcom. This is the tournament for the new millennium. You'll experience the most exciting battle in history. Let's get ready to battle. Feel the intensity when power and technique collide. Crush the competition. A battle beyond your imagination. Let the martial arts madness begin. 2001 is the year we make contact. Welcome to the revolution. Capcom versus SNK 2. Mark of the Millennium 2001.
CVS2 is well known and remains one of the GOATs in all of fighting games, just like its Marvel cousin. You have a large roster of Capcom and SNK fighters, slugging it out for some reason. That's another televised tournament hosted by the Masters Foundation and the Garcia Concern. Maybe. I think. Alright, the presentation isn't as strong as the first game here. The only way you know it's being televised is because some of the stages have live camera crews there. Props to the announcer though, he's amazing here, and he's just as iconic as the Alpha 3 announcer.
Here comes a new challenger. You must crush them. This is gonna be a match to remember. Fight! Now they came out with a sneaky surprise attack at the start of the round. Some may say that it was luck that helped this team to advance. That doesn't matter to me, because the bottom line is that this team won.
This game definitely has more sauce though, as there are several variations or grooves that you can choose from for each character that give them specific properties based on different Capcom and SNK titles. And this time it's all under the free ratio system. No more team restrictions. You can make the team of your dreams, but if you still dig the ratios, you can assign them freely in the home versions. Speaking of which, let's look at these ports. CVS2 has 3 main ports, the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube versions, at least in the US. Japan got a Dreamcast port, and it would be the most accurate to the arcade version since it ran on Naomi hardware. The PS2 is pretty close to the Dreamcast one, so that one would be the next best option. The GameCube and Xbox versions made balance changes, just like Alpha 3 Upper, so it's not used competitively because it took out roll canceling, which changes the combo potential of several characters across the board. These versions also have the extra subtitle of EO thrown in there. It means easy operation. There's a control scheme that makes it easier to do combos and special moves. Don't believe me? Take a look. It basically maps all 3 punches to the R button and then all the kicks to the L button. And supers are determined by the C-stick's direction and angle. It's the version I'm most familiar with, and it's one that I played the most growing up. The GameCube got fucked in terms of 2D fighters. If you wanted something from Capcom or SNK in this generation, and you didn't have a PS2 or an Xbox, this was your only option. Eventually I did get the PS2 version off the PS3 store a while back, so I do have access to it. Anyway, here's the price breakdowns. Just like CVS1, the prices are pretty reasonable considering what this game is. The fact that the digital PS2 version is still obtainable after all these years kinda invalidates the other ports, but you have to own a working PS3 to get it, so there's that. Well, we are halfway through this collection and nothing has been too outrageous yet. But that's all about to change because from here on out, your wallet's about to get fucked. Y'all better strap in.
Capcom presents Star Gladiator, Episode 2. 1 year has passed since the battle with the Fourth Empire. A new level of peace and harmony has spread throughout the world. However, that battle was only a prelude. Now, the war begins. Plasma Sword. Nightmare of Bilstein.
Pop quiz. On the MVC2 character select screen, who is the character between Anakaris and Captain America? Bonus points if you can tell me what series he's from. I'll give you a second. If you guessed Hayato Kanzaki from Star Gladiator, you are a fucking cheater because either you googled it or you just watched Godwin Quote's video. Anyway, Star Gladiator is Capcom's first 3D fighting game, and it shows. It worked out better than most attempts to break past the 3D ceiling. It's not a bad game, it's just a bit janky in some areas. But we're not here to talk about Star Gladiator. We're here to talk about the Dreamcast sequel, Star Gladiator 2. Or, if you live in the US, Plasma Sword, Nightmare of Bilstein. Why'd they change the title? I don't know. Is it as cool as Star Gladiator? No. Does it matter? Not really. Plasma Sword is more streamlined than Star Gladiator and therefore less janky. It's a 4-button system with 2 being used for your weapon and 1 being used for kicks. The last one is used for sidestepping. You have a 3-level super meter that you can use for super combos, or you can spin one of your bars in the new Plasma Strike system. If you land it, you trap your opponent in a box and you can attack them with a unique move or mechanic that's unique to your chosen character. This one got ported to Dreamcast. It's another one that I own alongside Star Gladiator. Honestly, it's not too far off from what I paid for it back in the day, but keep in mind the prices are only going to go up from here.
In the 19th century, people are strong believers of superstition and legend. Adventurers seek the world for fortune and glory and a legendary treasure which has the power to make dreams come true. That treasure is known as the Power Stone.
If you can encapsulate Capcom's Dreamcast era with a single title, it would be Power Stone. It only got ported once ages ago, and it barely gets referenced in anything Capcom does. So, Power Stone is an arena brawler. Perhaps it's the best one ever made, as nobody has quite hit it out of the park like Capcom. It's set in a charming world where you fight across 10 different and highly interactable environments with some crazy weapons thrown in for good measure. I guess a modern equivalent would be something like Combat Core or Mighty Fight Federation. However, they have nothing on Power Stone's main gimmick. These motherfuckers can transform. During the fight, the titular Power Stones fall somewhere in the area. You grab up 3 of them and your character can transform into a powered up state with boosted stats and new attacks, including 2 super moves that once used will revert you back to normal. This is a blast to play, and it's a shame that it's mostly been stuck on the Dreamcast.
Without warning, a dark cloud fills the sky, and then a huge shadow blankets the entire world with roar that shakes the entire land. Suddenly, a mysterious floating castle appears out of nowhere. In the blink of an eye, the Power Stone heroes are caught and transported to the floating castle. What will happen to our heroes? Welcome to the
1 year later, Capcom would grace us with the sequel to Power Stone, and it's even crazier. The main gimmick this time is 4-player combat. 4 characters duking it out across some dynamic-ass stages. 1 second you're fighting on an aircraft, the next you're skydive fighting away from it to land somewhere to finish the fight. Or a castle that gets set on fire that you have to continuously outrun as the stage progresses. There's new characters and a slew of new items to use that you can unlock as you play the game. There are some compromises though. The dodge counter mechanic is gone from the first game, and you only have 1 super move as opposed to the 2 whenever you transform like the first game. But it's minor compared to what they added to it. What isn't minor is the price tag. Yep, this is what Power Stone 2 will run you. The loose version alone is higher than most complete versions of the other games on the list. There is another port of both games on the PSP put in one collection with some added features. It's far and away the most reasonable price-wise, unless you want to play it on original hardware. Regardless, when you look at must-haves for the Dreamcast library, this one always makes it to the top 5. Now let's wrap things up with the last game in this collection.
1年前、今和のヒョウが全国の高校を襲撃した事件は無事解決し、生徒たちは今では何事もなかったかのようにまた繰り返しの日常へと戻っていった。しかし今また学園に戦慄が走ろうとしている。学園に何が起こったのか。我が手に落ちろ。燃えろ。Justice 学園。
I love rival schools. When my brother got on a whim one day from Toys R Us, I had no idea it would blow my fucking mind. But being an irresponsible kid, I eventually messed up both discs and I was unable to play Rival Schools for several years. One day I bought a used copy off of Amazon and never looked back, until I realized there was a sequel on Dreamcast, with a different name. What the fuck is up with Capcom and them naming their Dreamcast sequels different shit? Anyway, I buy a Dreamcast, a VMU, an extra controller, and a copy of Project Justice off of Amazon just because I love Rival Schools so much. This is the first game I ever got for my Dreamcast back in 2013 or so. When I finally got to play that bad boy, let me tell you, it improved on the PS1 game in every metric. Better graphics, more mechanics, great soundtrack, a really interesting story, and buttery smooth gameplay. I wish I knew about it sooner so I could have played it sooner. All was right with the world, and then my Dreamcast stopped reading my disc. It'll read my other games just fine, but for whatever reason, it won't read Project Justice most of the time. There's not a scratch on my disc or anything from what I can tell, so maybe it has something to do with the lens? Anyway, Project Justice is the sequel to Rival Schools. It's a fighting game where you control high schoolers based on different stereotypes and fight each other while trying to stop a ninja clan from taking over the country through the education system. Special moves and super moves are here obviously, but the main draw is the team up and party up system. Team up techniques occur when you call out one of your partners to either attack your opponent or to give yourself more health or more meter. The party up mechanic uses all 3 members of your team to do a massive combo attack on your opponent. Both of these can be stopped by activating your own team up or party move. This will switch over to one of your partners where you have the chance to stop them from doing their move. It's simple to learn, but it has plenty of depth if you're willing to put the time in. But how much will this somewhat forgotten gem cost you today? My god, without a doubt, this is the single most expensive game in this video. It almost beats out everything in the last video except for the Punisher. But when you add in the fact that it's a sequel to a somewhat obscure fighting game with a different name, on a different system that had a brief time on the market, which means it probably had a low print run, that's never been ported anywhere else until now, it kinda makes sense. So, we have reached the end of the list, and there's only one thing left to do. We're going to add up all these games and see how much their best versions end up costing us.
Here comes the money!
Here we go!
Wow, those totals are much lower than the ones in the last video. Pretty much everything was a straightforward choice except for which Street Fighter Alpha 3 port to go with. I decided to go with the Anthology port since I felt like it would be the closest to what we would get in the collection next year. The next best thing would be the Dreamcast port, but that would only jack the price up another 40 or 50 bucks. But even with that, it would still be lower than all the best Marvel ports combined. Well, that was the video. Everything was pretty reasonably priced except for the last couple of Dreamcast games. Still, you should definitely pick this one up just like the Marvel collection when it comes out. I don't think the pre-orders are up and running yet, but in the meantime, I'm kinda hungry, so I'm gonna go and grab a bite to eat. I have a serious hankering for some tuna with bacon.